Thank you. I'm going to now talk to you uh, with some very down-to-earth and practical ideas about how we can communicate with patients and the general public. So we need to start by thinking about the reading skills of our audience. So this was a headline in a newspaper in the UK a year or two ago: millions cannot read well enough for karaoke. So a study had found that more than 5 million adults hadn't got the reading skills to read Frank Sinatra's song, New York, New York. So that's not very important, is it? This headline should have said millions cannot read well enough for health and medicines information. So the bottom line here all the time is to remember that your average person, your man or woman in the street, maybe isn't that much skilled a reader. They maybe don't read very much. And so that's what we have to have at the back of our mind all the time when we're communicating with them. So what I'm going to talk to you today is how we applied the method of user testing to a clinical trial results lay summary. So I need to tell you what user testing is. So you select key points of information from any document. You recruit 10 people from the target group, that is the people who the information is designed for. You interview them individually, and there are two parts to this interview. The first is quantitative, so you have a questionnaire where you ask them to find and then express in their own words, the key points that you've selected. Critically, there is then a second part of the interview where you ask them general questions about what they liked and didn't like about the document. And inevitably, they then start to talk about the problems they might have had in the quantitative aspect. So the beauty of this process is that you aren't just giving somebody some information and saying, what do you think about this? You're actually getting them to actually have to use it. And then you're asking them what they think about it. So what you're getting is a very in-depth and informed view about that document. And crucially, the process is iterative. So you write and design, you test with members of the target group, you review using good practice in information writing and design, and then you test again. Now, such testing only really works properly if you test on what I would call real people. So this is from a test we did recently, and these are the occupations or the details of the people who we involved. And so you can see that these are people with a variety of backgrounds. And so this is what I call real people. These aren't expert patients, the people who might be involved in patient groups or other groupings that we get together. These are representative of the general public. And they're much more likely in user testing to find where the problems are. So I said just now that when you've tested, you then need to apply the rules of good practice in information writing and design. So what are these golden rules, as I've called them? Be conversational when writing. Most people are used to communicating by listening and talking. They're not so used to communicating through writing. So if you're conversational in the way that you write, you're reaching out to people who are used mostly to conversation. Use everyday words. Now, you may think this is common sense, but so often we don't use everyday words. When you need to include a medical word, always put the lay term first and the medical word after. So often we find it's the other way around. And this document is for lay people, so you need the lay term first. Use short sentences with one message per sentence. If you've got a piece of punctuation in a sentence, you need to think, well, should that be a full stop? Particularly people who don't read too well, they find long sentences really difficult and have to keep reading them through to work out what the messages are. Short headings that stand out. These are real, this is a real friend to people reading a document. having headings that stand out and that explain what is in the text that follows. We don't want page after page of text without these headings. If you want to emphasize something, use bold. Don't use italics or capitals, which are actually harder to read. Use bullets for lists and to explain complex information. Bullets serve two purposes. They make things easier to read, and they make things look easier to read. And half the battle with something like a lay summary is convincing people that this is something that they can read and they will find useful. Leave plenty of white space. Don't cram information in. That is one very good way of making people not read information if they feel that it's too crammed in. Only use simple charts and graphs. Your average person just isn't used to charts and graphs, and so they won't necessarily understand, and it will certainly turn them off if you use complicated ones. And finally, if you're going to use icons or pictograms, always test them, because what you think a picture means isn't necessarily what a member of the public may think it means. So those are the 10 golden rules, and I'm going to give you these all at the end, and then I'm going to test you on them. No, I'm not going to do that. That was a joke, but these are really important things that you need to remember. Okay, I've got two questions for you during this presentation. The first is, what do you think works best for lay people? Short documents or longer documents? So I'm hoping that there's some sort of magic going on in the background here. Okay, well that's pretty clear. So we can stop sharing those results. So this is a bit of a trick question, really. If you have a short document, but all you've done is compress everything to make it shorter, people often say, oh, well, it just needs to be 2 sides, you know, or 4 pages. And so then you've got 8 pages to cram into those short. So what I'm saying is longer documents, patients do like them if they're well laid out, they've got good headings, they're easy to navigate. So a short document can be terrible because it's had to include so much information in such a short space. So don't just make it short for the sake of it. Lay people will much prefer a slightly longer document if it's well laid out and easy to find the information that they want. So I want to move on to the next slide now, if we can remove that polling page.
I think you have to remove it on your own.
Oh, I have to do it, do I? Okay. Good. Okay, so I've explained to you what user testing is. I've talked to you about the golden rules. So now I'm going to talk to you about the findings of some user testing we did of a clinical trial results lay summary. So this was a document that had these 4 pages. And this was done before the regulations were talked about and all the processes that have been going on in the European Union. And so we user tested it with members of the public who are the target audience for these results lay summaries. So I'm just going to talk to you about a few things that we did. You'll see here that we've got subheadings. So instead of this section all being one lot of text, we've put a subheading in here just to help it to compartmentalize it and to help people navigate around. You'll see that the main headings stand out, And we find that if you have some sort of design that has a line that goes all the way across the column, then that compartmentalizes each section. It makes people, makes it much easier for people to find their way around the document. You'll see we've got some bullet points here. These were 3 things that the study was looking at. And rather than just having it as text, putting those bullets in makes it much easier to identify what those 3 things are. You'll see we use bolding here for the main outcome measures for the study. And as I've said, bold is the best way of emphasizing text. And you'd also see that there is some white space on here. It's not text that's all crammed in. So one of the questions we asked people in the user testing was, what was the purposes of the study? And this is the wording that we had before we revised it. And you'll see on the left here that the 2 purposes are actually not very prominent. It's the first is here and the second is here. And one of the problems people had was that those 2 purposes were quite a long way from each other in the text. And there was a lot of text in the middle here, which was actually belonging elsewhere. So in the revised version, after we tested it, we've made the 2 purposes bold, and they're much closer together here. And in the revised testing, the patients, the members of the public found this information much better. Another question was about the change it was found in the 3 groups. And in the original, the subheadings were primary finding and other findings. Now, a layperson won't understand the term primary finding. It's something we use all the time, but it isn't a lay-friendly term. And so after user testing, before we tested it again, we refined those headings to focus on the symptoms, things that lay people do understand. So the primary finding was daytime nose symptoms, so that's what we wrote, and then other symptoms, not other findings. And as I'm talking, if you think about the suggestions I'm making, think about this idea that they're more conversational. So you might talk to a person about daytime nose symptoms. You probably wouldn't talk to them about a primary finding. Okay, this is about the use of terminology. So in the original here, we had patient's global evaluation of seasonal allergy symptoms. Now, I've just read that out, and that's clearly not conversational. In the revised version, we put the lay version first. Patients felt better overall about their seasonal allergies, and then afterwards, the technical or medical term. And again, it's conversational. Patients felt better overall about their seasonal allergies. Okay, we used a very limited number of graphics in the document. As I've said, people aren't used to graphs and charts that are complicated, and we thought this was a nice simple chart. So change in daytime nasal symptoms, and we've got the 3 bars that you can see here. But we got bad feedback from the people who tested the information, people describing it as confusing or meaning nothing. Somebody said, there's no number, so it's hard to know whether a smaller bar initially looking at it is a good or a bad thing. And somebody else said, I only understood it when I read the text underneath. It looked a bit random with the black line at the top. And then another participant said the chart looked upside down. And so this is a really good example of how you can only find out how good or less good your document is by asking real people. And obviously now you can see why people might think this is upside down, because people who are familiar with bar charts are much more used to seeing them the other way around. So we turned it the other way around. So at the bottom right here, we've got the revised version, and we've put improvement on the left-hand side here to indicate whether it is indeed good or bad. This is a really important point. We asked the members of the public, who do you think this document has been written for? Most weren't aware, after reading the document, that it was intended for the general public. And they talked about doctors and researchers and other people. Now, who it was written for isn't explicitly stated in the summary. And so we recommend that in any document you write for the public, you make sure that it makes clear that it is for members of the public, so who it's for and why it's been written. And in fact, any document that you write at the top, it should be very clear about these two things, so that you're making sure you're targeting and getting the people that you're looking for. This is more important, and this was a question about other studies showing different results. About 2/3 of the people didn't remember the statement that other studies may show different results, or didn't think it was highlighted enough. Now, the wording used in the guidance is, this summary only shows the results from this one study. Other studies may find different results. Now, we don't think this is sufficient. It's absolutely critical that somebody reading the results of one study doesn't then go on to make decisions or take actions just based on that one study. And one of the participants in the user test said, this sounds like a really good medicine. I'm going to ask my doctor if I can have this. And so that just shows how there's a lack of understanding quite reasonably in the lay public about the fact that you generally have a number of trials before you come together with a decision about a medicine. And so I think we have to make it absolutely clear and emphasize it more than once in a lay summary about a clinical trial that it shouldn't be read in isolation. So I'd like to acknowledge the co-authors in this work. So Lynn and Kirsten and Barbara and Amy and Angelica from the university, from Luto and from Merck and MSD. And this was published in Therapeutic Innovation and Regulatory Science. So you can have a look at the full study if you would like to. So just my second question for you. I've talked about user testing and how we get people to find information and then explain it. And so I want you to think about what you think is most likely for a reason for a document to fail, that people can't find the information or people can't understand it. And this is looking really promising because it is about 50-50. So this is remarkably consistent to that. So this, if you think about my top, my golden rules, a significant number of them are about how the document is laid out and designed. So if you're writing for lay people, it's no good just looking at the words. You can make the words as lay friendly as you like, but if people can't find the information, then it might as well not have been made lay friendly. So when you're writing for lay people, that layout, design, navigation is so important because it's half of the problem that people have. So to conclude, if you're writing a lay summary of a clinical trial results, you need an introductory section that makes it clear it's for a lay audience. I think you need a subheading that talks about the fact that other studies may show different results and how important it is that you don't make decisions based on just one study. Place the keywords at the beginning of the bullet. You'll remember that thing about symptoms. If you put the technical term at the beginning, then people will pass by it and won't get to the lay version, the lay words at the end. Use lay-friendly wording for outcome measures. Don't talk about just a primary outcome. If you're going to use a chart or graph, it's got to be simple and you need to test it with your target audience. Good design and formatting is essential, especially the headings and subheadings. I've said that more than once, and I don't mind because this is just so important. And really, only testing with real people can we assure ourselves that lay summaries are fit for purpose. So even if you just test it on a small number of people, make sure they're real people, and make sure that as well as asking them to find and explain things, you then ask them for their general views. It can be absolutely fantastic to get that feedback, and it shows you things that you just didn't see yourself. So let's just go through these golden rules again. Be conversational, everyday words, the lay term first, short sentences, short headings that stand out, bold for emphasis, bullets, using white space, using simple graphs and charts, and testing pictures before you use them. Thank you very much.